We don't tend to look at full pre-built systems here on the channel much, but today we have something a little bit special because we've actually teamed up with AWD-IT and MSI to build a PC to our specifications, and it will go on sale as the eTeknix specced PC or recommended PC. So to show you exactly how good it is, we're going to take a look at the system, the parts, and see how it performs in a bunch of games. So let's break this down into sections as there's quite a bit to talk about, starting with the pricing. The build itself comes in at £1,395.95, and for that you're actually getting a very good mainstream PC that will handle all of the latest games. AWD themselves even tout it as being perfect for Fortnite, Valorant, COD Warzone, Halo Infinite and Battlefield 2042. Now, we actually specced up the system ourselves to see how much it would cost to build as a DIY system to check out the value for money aspect of it. And building ourselves, it came in at £1,364.49 at today's current prices. This means that you're paying an extra £31.46 to have the system built for you, along with a 3-year warranty as standard on all parts and labour, and including free delivery as well. For me, that's a very affordable proposition, as if you're a new PC builder and are unsure as to how to build a PC, this takes out any fear that you may have. And even if you're an experienced builder, for the sake of a little over 30 quid, it's a bit of a no-brainer, especially when you consider the warranty that you get. Because aside from power supplies, most PC hardware only comes with a 1 or 2 year warranty as standard, so it definitely gives extra peace of mind. Now, let's talk about the parts, and you will start to see how AWD and ourselves tried to cram in as many MSI components as possible. Firstly, this is a build that we teamed up with MSI and AWD to build, and secondly, I'm a bit of a sucker for keeping parts consistent. If you've watched any of my own builds or live streams, you'll know that I always try to keep motherboards and graphics cards under the same brand. Not only does the styling typically work better, but customization through software or changing RGB is just made a lot easier, instead of having multiple pieces of software just to change a few simple lights. So starting with the case, we wanted to go with something small enough that, say, younger gamers would have room for in their bedrooms, while not compromising on space for components. Also, wanting to appeal to a bigger audience while remaining affordable, we wanted to include some RGB, and of course, airflow so that the components aren't starved of air. This is where the MAG Forge M100R comes in with a complete mesh front that will give us more than enough airflow, and coupled with the 4 included ARGB fans, we're already off to a great start. There's also a large amount of ventilation on the top for expelling air, and even though the case is micro ATX, there's still plenty of room inside for larger components. The case also comes with an ARGB control board, so customization of the system is easy and seamless through the LED switch button on the case. Moving on to the motherboard, we went with the B760M-P. Not only does it fit the bill by being micro ATX, but it's no slouch with support for the latest 14th gen processors from Intel, and as it's the DDR5 model, we have support for up to 6800MHz DDR5 memory. There's also plenty of USB connections on the rear, including Type-C, USB 3.2 Gen 2, and connectivity for more USBs from the motherboard to the I/O on the case. So for gaming, you have more than enough for your keyboard, mouse, mic, headphones and controllers. There's also 3 display connectors if you need them for troubleshooting, though as mentioned the warranty more than covers that anyway. And we also have gigabit LAN, so overall a pretty robust set of connectors, along with 2 M.2 slots for Gen 4 drives and 4 SATA ports for older but typically larger storage. Now, talking of storage, games are getting larger, and we wanted to include something that was going to be able to handle a nice selection of games, and these days you're going to want 1TB as a minimum, and that's where the MSI Spatium M371 comes in. With read speeds of up to 2350MB a second and write speeds up to 1900MB a second, games should be fast at loading and also not bottleneck your textures mid-game. You do have the ability to upgrade to something larger or faster, but this I think strikes a good balance of both. And you can always add a secondary drive in if you want over on the system's product page, where you can customize every single part. Memory wise, 32GB is definitely the new standard, and as MSI don't make memory, at least yet, we specced up 32GB of Corsair Vengeance DDR5 5600MHz memory. Again, we could have gone faster, but at 5600MHz CL36, we've definitely gone for a well-balanced system, without unnecessarily adding cost on for not much gain. Again, you could spec something up faster or with RGB, but that's going to add on to the cost, and this system is all about balancing value for money. In terms of the CPU, again we wanted value for money without restricting performance through bottlenecks. That's where the Intel Core i5 14400F came into play. With 10 cores, 16 threads and a max turbo frequency of 4.7 GHz, it's going to be more than enough to handle the latest games without limitations. It's also pretty low power in the grand scheme of things, coming in with a base power of 65 watts and a turbo power of 148 watts, so temperatures should be under control too. Which then brings me on to cooling. Aside from the 4 120mm ARGB fans that come included with the case, keeping the CPU tame is the Be Quiet Pure Rock 2 Black. Not only does it tie in really well with the system, but with its great cooling performance thanks to the 4 6mm heat pipes and PureWings 2 120mm PWM fan, it's also extremely quiet while looking great as well. Now, being a gaming system, we wanted a graphics card that could handle the latest games and also have the latest technologies. And sticking with MSI, we opted for the RTX 4070 Super Ventus 2X, meaning that not only do we get a card with an extremely proficient cooler, but being an RTX 4070 gives us access to ray tracing capabilities along with DLSS upscaling with frame generation. So performance should be more than enough, even in the most intensive games. Now, to power this system, we wanted something that was powerful enough while also giving headroom for upgrades and incorporating the latest technologies like being ATX 3.0 compliant and being PCIe 5.0 ready, along with having a solid 80+ gold rating. And that's where the MSI MAG A750GL 750W PCIe 5 power supply came into play. With a native 12VH PWR connector and being able to deal with transient spikes, it's more than enough for what we need, and allows you to upgrade the CPU or the GPU at a later date without the need to upgrade the power supply. On top of these great parts, you'll also get Windows 11 Home included, or you can upgrade to the Pro version, or choose no operating system if you already have one or want to go down the Linux route instead. So I think you'll agree that we have a very well balanced system with some of the latest parts on the market, and when we look at the build itself, it's easy to see that AWD have done a great job of fitting them, down to the cables being routed nicely on the business side and using zip ties to fasten them down on the rear. Now, with any smaller form factor case, space does always come at a premium, but with the inclusion of flat cables on the power supply and no unnecessary cables dangling around, it means that you can see that thought has gone into the build process, and by being neat and tidy, it does mean there's no restrictions in airflow. Also, I wouldn't be happy putting our brand name on something that was done subpar. So moving on to the BIOS, there's not much to say other than we can see that resizable bar is enabled as expected, and the XMP profile is set, making sure that the memory is running at the right speed. So with everything kind of behaving as it should, let's take a look at the performance. Now, being the fact that we have an RTX 4070 Super inside, it makes sense to utilise DLSS upscaling where possible. So we've tested the machine in a handful of games to see what kind of frame rates we can get without sacrificing on quality. It's here where in a Plague Tale Requiem, we find both at 1080 and 1440p that we come in with respectable frame rates of 100 and 72 FPS respectively. 4K is where things fall a bit short on the Ultra preset as expected, though enabling DLSS onto balance mode does see a 63% uplift in performance, though enabling frame gen increases that margin by another 32%, now coming in at 86 FPS. So even a system as affordable as this is able to play games at 4K effortlessly thanks to upscaling technology. Banishers, Ghosts of New Eden, which I'll talk about a little bit more later on, sees some limitations at all resolutions, especially in built-up areas of the game like we tested. Again, enabling upscaling with frame generation sees some huge uplifts in performance of over 101% at 1080p. We see similar gains of 102% at 1440p, and while 4K sees performance drop slightly, FrameGen still manages to give us an uplift in performance of 54%. So again, for an i5/4070 super based system, we're enjoying 4K high settings with some amazing performance metrics. In Cyberpunk, we get respectable numbers at both 1080 and 1440p, and while upscaling at 1440p does help slightly, at 1080p it actually results in a margin of error worse result by 2 FPS. Again, FrameGen helps propel our performance and eliminate the limitations from the CPU, while 4K also helps with FrameGen enabled to increase performance by a staggering 138%. Enabling ray tracing naturally sees a drop in performance as the system works harder, and while 1080p with no upscaling does net around 60 FPS, upscaling really helps to push the performance of the system, even without frame generation at 1080 and 1440p. There are still limitations as we see 1080p coming at 73 FPS and 1440 at 72 FPS. But DLSS 3 is where we see some sizable gains of 147% at 1080, 205% at 1440, and an even more impressive 282% gain at 4K, now giving us 65 FPS. Not bad for a £1,400 system. Hogwarts Legacy shows some distinct limitations again, even when using upscaling at the lower resolution. Though with a 4070 Super, you'll likely be playing at 1440p, which sees a steady scale when enabling DLSS and with FrameGen. But the more impressive numbers come by way of 4K, where FrameGen figures come in at 102 FPS, which is only 10% behind our 1080p pure rasterization numbers. So a nice increase in resolution quality without sacrificing too much in the way of performance. Then finally in Hogwarts, with ray tracing turned on, in no upscaling mode, you are getting below 60 FPS at 1080p, and upscaling doesn't really do much unless FrameGen is on, which gives us a solid 103% boost in performance. While again, for me personally, I'd rather boost things up to 4K with FrameGen on to get a nice balance of visuals and solid performance at 68 frames per second. Now performance is one thing, but temperatures play a key part to any pre-built system. I mean, it's no good if you're being thermal throttled and sacrificing performance as a consequence. So looking at the thermals is, I guess, a good way to see that this system is built to a solid specification. That means we're not being limited by something frivolous. It's here at idle where the system is virtually silent, with the CPU cooler around 550 RPM and the fans around 835 RPM. And the CPU idled at around 35 degrees, and the GPU around 30 degrees. Now within games, we found the CPU temperature sitting between 57 and 63 degrees for the most part across all resolutions, including 1080p, where the CPU is arguably running harder than at 4K, where the workload is shifted more towards the GPU. In terms of the GPU temperature, again, things were still well under control, with the lowest temperature at 1080p in Banishers Ghost of New Eden, where both the CPU and GPU came in identically at 62 degrees. While the highest temperature we saw was in a Plague Tale Requiem at all resolutions, where the GPU didn't exceed beyond 77 degrees. Looking at something that puts a bit more of a consistent load on the CPU, we booted up Cinebench R23 to see how tame our temperatures were there too. We found during a multi-core load that the CPU rose to around 67 degrees, so it was still well under control, and the CPU cooler only increased its fan speed to just under 1200 RPM, so still within, I guess, limits of being on the quiet side of things. So overall, a very well balanced system that gave us very respectable performance in games. Now, speaking of games, as part of the deal that we're doing, the first 70 purchases of this system will get a free copy of Banishers Ghost of New Eden, which has only been out for around 2 weeks or so and has already racked up a very positive rating over on Steam. So again, there's some more added value in getting one of these systems as opposed to building it yourself. Also, as I have kids myself, I know that many young budding gamers want to be streamers as well, as because of the parts we've chosen and the inclusion of the RTX 4070 Super and its latest NVENC encoder, gaming and streaming from the whole system will be effortless. Now for those who maybe want something a little bit cheaper, AWD and MSI have also built a £729 base system with a Ryzen 5 5500 and RTX 4060, along with various MSI components including motherboard, power supply and SSD. So again, a well-balanced system that offers a strong value for money proposition. So maybe we'll look at getting that one in our offices in the future. And again, as it has a 40 series GPU, you're gonna get the huge benefits of frame generation. But yeah, like I said, it's been a while since we've had a pre-built in our office, and it was a fun one to work on, knowing that we picked the parts and specced it up in collaboration with these two brands in an effort to show that sometimes pre-builts can work out more cost effective, given the extra added value you get, along with peace of mind of having professionals build it for you. For now, that's going to about wrap this one up. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, a like and a sub to the channel would be amazing. And if you love what we do, then you can help support us over on Patreon, where you'll get a ton of exclusive benefits, including behind the scenes content, access to our testing data, monthly live streams, bi-weekly game nights, and much, much more. The link for all that great stuff is, as always, down below. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.